Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ben Stewart Podcast. Our guest today, we've had her on the podcast before we had Gordo, and I'm really happy to get her back on this new format. Her name is Maya Shetreat, MD. She's a neurologist, an herbalist, an urban farmer, and the author of The Dirt Cure, which has been translated into 10 languages. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Telegraph, NPR, Sky News, the Dr. Oz Show, and more. Dr. Maya is the founder of the Terrain Institute, where she teaches earth-based programs for transformational healing, including professional training programs for psychedelic-assisted approaches. She works and studies with indigenous communities and healers from around the world, and is a lifelong student of ethnobotany, plant healing, and the sacred. This is going to be an in-depth but very beautiful conversation with Dr. Maya Shetreat, so let's get her in here on the Ben Stewart Podcast. And here we are, Dr. Maya Shetreat. So nice to see you again.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think the last time was in 2020. I think it was. That was, yeah. So maybe that was even the last time we talked. I follow you on Instagram, and I have to say, I absolutely love those hilarious posts that you make. There's a lot of posts about gardening. You'll even go into some baby Yoda memes. It's just hilarious. So anybody listening, please follow Dr. Maya Shetreat on Instagram if you want a laugh and also some really good info. But it's so great to have you back. And yeah, really interested, like what's been new for you before we just dive into your work? What's been new for you since, I don't know, the past couple of years?
Gosh, well, I feel like the world has changed a lot. And, it's sort of like a really liminal time. Still, it's been liminal and it remains liminal. And I think it's been really exciting to watch. Not that it's been fun to go through all the difficulty and, polarization that's happened, but it's been really interesting to watch people navigate this liminal period. And so for me, I've done a lot more kind of embracing of guide work that I do with microdosing. I've done a lot more work with building out a psychedelics training program, and just one that's not for professionals, for anybody, to just do a deep dive into the science and the sacred. And I've been looking into a lot more work with how we can engage with plants, and especially these sacred medicine plants in right relationship, which has come to a line of, I don't even know if I want to call them products. I call them ceremony in a bottle. And so those we are also going to be sharing later this month, actually.
Amazing. Let's definitely get into that at some point. I want to ask this question. What did your practice used to look like? And how would you say, maybe even since COVID, from BC to AC, before COVID and after COVID, what are you noticing, like, en masse? Are there people that are developing like more anxiety because of what's going on right now? Has your approach to helping people become more nuanced since there's been this kind of global anxiety going on? Have you sharpened or more fine-tuned what it is that you're offering?
I think so. I mean, I think one of the biggest and most exciting things about this period is that people are finally starting to realize that all of these bodies of authority that we've been honoring as or venerating have been kind of broken apart, right? They don't carry the same authority that they used to carry. And, that goes for the government, that goes for the CDC, right? Like you name it, doctors, scientists, all of these sort of institutional authorities have really come into question by a lot of people in all directions. I mean, I would say like a lot of very conventional MDs felt during the pandemic like the CDC was really political. And I've thought the CDC was really political for a very, very long time, or I knew the CDC was political. But suddenly, a lot of people in mainstream medicine also could see that. So it's been a really interesting time. And that breaking apart of authority outside of ourselves is, I think, part of this, awakening, if we can call it that, and an opportunity to tune back into our inner authority. The issue with that is it's scary, right? It's scary because everything we've been trained to look towards to tell us what to do is no longer holding the same sense of credential that it had. And so, it is a big time of anxiety, I think, for a lot of people. And it's, and that's okay. I think that's the big thing to know, is that when we're in these like very potent liminal periods, a lot of feelings come up, a lot of relationships come into question, a lot of jobs and how we spend our time come into question, where we live, how we live, all of those things are up for review. And that's really disruptive, but it's also part of the process. And I think, from my standpoint, I'm seeing a lot of people who are looking for support and guidance walking through that liminal period for themselves.
I like that. And I like the way that you're bringing light to, how should I say it, both the light and the dark, both the yin and the yang, seeing that there really is some good that's being shown, or even just some growth in people. And the challenging of external institutions it's not so black and white. It's not just good or just bad. It has these various colors to it. And I was going to ask, but I think you kind of touched upon it, which is like, what's good about the past few years? What is it taught people? And I think you did touch upon it, but like, how can we utilize what goodness has been revealed from the past few years and move forward with that? And like, let's say questioning certain institutions is good, but attacking and demonizing might be a little too far. And I feel like sometimes it's a seesaw. It's if you tip a little bit to one side, it's hard not to go all the way. And so how have you found yourself navigating that? And have you found yourself navigating this kind of like what's happening with the world is also happening within you? How do you navigate these past few years of, I know you said you already saw signs of this in the CDC and signs of this in other institutions. But what has it brought out in you? Did it really just kind of bring out in you that, now I realize how I can be there to support others through this kind of challenging initiation phase?
I feel like I've been preparing for this period for many, many years. And then it was here. And now we're in it. And it's, I know the pandemic has been announced over, or whatever it was. And whatever it is, but when this whole thing began, it just felt like, okay, here we are. I don't think it really changed very much about what I was working towards or what I wanted to do. I think I tend to, obviously we respond to our environment and what's going on around us and all of that, but to some degree, it's also like a green screen. Like, you have to be really solid and focused in what's calling you and what's your yes and where your purpose is. And it can be informed by what's going on, and sometimes it will divert, right? Sometimes you need to divert. That's why you always need to be in conversation with what's happening around you. But it can't be, for me at least, it's not determined by what's going on around me. So for me, it didn't really tremendously change what I was doing. It may have accelerated certain things, which I'm kind of I'm an impatient person sometimes, so that's not always the worst outcome for me. But yeah, I mean, I think that, to your point of the extreme nature of, the good and the bad, going from disapproving to hating, that whole, swinging of the pendulum, I think that there's one of the things that we really love about having authority around us to tell us what to do is we also can hate them, and we can also criticize them, and we can also, externalize that. So instead of taking responsibility and having agency for like how our country is, or how our life is, or how our relationships are, we can kind of, we can say, oh, well, it's that goddamn whoever, like blame it all on the government or blame it all on, and so this is like also, I think, a time that's uncomfortable because it's harder to externalize our shadow. Well, we can externalize our shadow, which is what we see with this, like, if you're bad, you're all bad. You can't be complex. You can't be someone who's just a human being. I mean, we're all liminal beings with lots of identities and good and bad. And anyone who wants to say they're not, and wants to externalize the bad to somebody else, this is a time where, that mirror might be coming and shocking them into, or just giving them a glance, right? To say, hey, like, all the crappy things around you, you have a hand in that. It's not just that evil guy running the country or whatever. I mean, not to say that they don't have a hand in it too, but it's a co-creation, right? Like, we're dreaming this reality into being. And so, if you don't like the dream a different dream. That's what we have to kind of engage with here.
I like that. I definitely feel that, within me, I've acknowledged that oftentimes we have our beliefs and we don't see what they call us to action in service to. So when we believe that it really is this person and this institution, even if we're partially correct, if we miss the nuance that we're also partially incomplete about it, then we can completely justify, by dehumanizing the other, a crusade against that other, even if it's just a smear campaign online. So I really appreciate that nuance that you bring to bear. I really want to hop into this transformational healing that you offer. I want to understand that, because I also feel like kind of the reason why I wanted to launch in with what have you noticed since pandemic? What have you noticed people have been needing in terms of healing? And I'd like to start there. Transformational healing, what is it? And how do people engage with it? Maybe how does it differ from traditional concepts around healing?
Well, I think there's a few different ideas that I would bring in. One of them is just the idea that healing is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and even ecological. And so if we're thinking about a physical problem as just physical, then we're missing a huge amount of healing and things that are being spotlit, by a physical challenge. And I'll say, even, a few times today, I talked to two people who were having issues with like chronic hives, or like an acute case of hives that were clearly connected to an emotional event, an emotional and spiritual event that, so understanding that, there are a lot of people in wellness who say, yes, the food, yes, the exercise, yeah, right? Like, there's fasting and, all of these different kind of biohacking ideas, but we're not always bringing in the fact that a lot of this is emotional and spiritual. And if you start there, you actually can address a lot of issues without having to do 47 supplements and, live this sort of super strict lifestyle. Not to say that there aren't real reasons to do that and benefits, but that transformational healing also means that time and space become less relevant. So transformational healing means that we can kind of step outside of regular linear ways that we expect things to happen, and Sometimes that's like skipping, right? Like it's where a moment feels like hours, or days or months or years. And it's also where years can all happen and be compressed into one moment in time. So transformational healing is about knowing that we're these liminal beings with all of these different bodies, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and so on. It's understanding that relationship, both within us and around us, is what informs everything. That's what we are. We're in a web of engagement and in nested relationships around us and within us. And then that we have this nonlinear way that we can experience healing and awakening. And so it's very exciting work for me to get to engage and be a guide and hold space for people through those experiences, because obviously I'm not the one, I do healing work, yes, but it's always coming from the person, right? It's coming from the person and it's coming from the relationship. So I think it's a very special way of operating and getting to be in the world. And I'm very honored to get to do that work.
Yeah, I like the way you mention it. It brings to mind, at least, that perhaps we reduce healing to a singular problem that we can wrap our mind around. And that's why maybe in the past we've really relied upon a doctor or a professional to say, like, come on, doc, tell me what the problem is. So then, not only can you tell me what to do about it, but I can go home and Google that thing and see what Google has to say about it. And perhaps there's no issue with that, but perhaps that is a telltale sign that we're looking to really just quantify the issue as being this thing and then attack the thing. So what it seems like you're saying, and help me if I'm getting off base with this, but by understanding that we are a part of a system, that we are intimately connected with this larger web, that the individual themselves keeps open, maybe not even just an open mind, but just open to the fact that this may not just be a pathogen or a toxin or something environmental, that this might actually be something emotional. It might be in my relationships, and it could also be that I'm not. When you mention spiritual, I just kind of feel like perhaps we're violating ourselves in some ways by not really listening to our intuition or doing the thing we know that we ethically know we should, and we're violating ourselves, and with repeated violations that could show up in different ways. And these are just concepts that I'm throwing out, but like, is that kind of touching base on how to break it back out of traditional healing, which is diagnose the problem, fix the problem, and the whole system should change? And this is more or less understand you are also a part of the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we love labels in our society, and it is very reductionist. I mean, it serves a purpose, right? That reductionism has a purpose. And but we were even talking before we began about, like, well, what are the labels that we put under my name to say what I do? And I was like, I don't even know. Like, I have so many, and they're all true, but like, does it really encompass and embody like what it is that I do? No, because the aliveness of us, it can't be encapsulated into like words or boxes or labels the way we love in our society. Why do we love that? Because we want to master things. We want to control things. We don't like this, we don't like wildness. We don't like this sort of, it's like this uncivilized, wild, out of control sort of energy is very contrary to everything that happened since, the Age of Enlightenment, the so-called Age of Enlightenment. And, and even modern science, which, I am a scientist and I love science because I love that language to describe mystery, among many others. We didn't put in my labels that I also do ancient astrology. And I'm also, I studied that for many years, and I practice numerology and other languages that are very complex. And I can say, as someone who's studied medicine and neurology, that, the ancient systems of astrology blow my mind, really. They're so nuanced and complex and predictive, and their own art and science, just like medicine. So, to your point of relationship, right? How do we navigate? First of all, how do we navigate that we're not in control? How do we navigate the fact that we want to control and plan and have like agendas and schedules, and yet we're also in this, we're in the unknown all the time, as much as we want to pretend that we're not. We like to know what's going to come next, but we really don't. And there is a wildness, and that in that wildness, in that kind of out of control nature of what's really happening, there's also a tremendous amount of potential and possibility. And so that kind of goes to that idea of like, if we can engage with the way we're in relationship and the way we're co-creating, we can make the world different, and we can do it actually, I think, very quickly. I mean, if you look at what happened during COVID, and we could get into, we could go down a lot of rabbit holes, but I think we shouldn't probably. But the reality is that things changed like this, and people engaged with that. People, the world changed very, very quickly. And that can happen. It doesn't have to be a COVID. It doesn't have to be like a catastrophe or some created event or anything like that. If we have a change in our mindset and in our perspective or our paradigm, things can change just as quickly.
It reminds me of, let's say, having done ayahuasca, if I were to just put humanity as represented by the comment sections on social media and things along those lines, that the ratio in my mind when the experience of ayahuasca is starting to accelerate inside my body, there's parts of me that are excited by it. But that excitement isn't all just jumping for joy. Some of it is like, how fast is this going to accelerate? What if this isn't good? What if I'm going to go to a dark place? And then part of that is blame. I shouldn't have done this, or I wonder if this is because that person over there is moaning, or, trying to point the finger. And I relate that to a planet experiencing something that is uncomfortable. COVID comes about, and all these things that really none of us were imprisoned, immediately. It was these stay-at-home orders, but it was interesting to see everything that surfaced in the form of, we got to point fingers because something's changing rapidly. And it's almost like there's this ratio of people that a lot of them are like, who's to blame? Is this going to get worse? How far could this go? This is a slippery slope. I don't know if I like this anymore. Please make it stop, which are all the same things that seem to happen in ayahuasca or sometimes plant medicines when a situation seems like, oh, I've lost control of it. So that's interesting. You mentioned we love to feel like we have control of things. And then once it dawns on us that I'm not actually steering this thing, then the worst case scenarios start to pop up. Well, if you're not steering, how close are we to a brick wall or flying off a cliff? And that is interesting to see. And because we mentioned, there in your bio that you do psychedelic-assisted approaches to healing, I'm curious your ways of maybe even just wrapping language around what is that moment? How do you work with that moment of the panic is starting? Maybe it's not even crescendoed yet, but the panic is starting, and you know what this path typically leads to. How do you guide people before and even during those moments, or even afterwards when they're kind of shell-shocked by what happened to them? How do you guide those moments where it feels like everything is ramping up and the panic is starting to set in?
Well, I think it's really key to, number one, I'm not sure that there's a lot of ways to prepare. for those moments. That's the reality, is they're out of our control. And that's part of why they're such potent medicine, right? Because we're engaging with surrender. And in our society and our culture, surrender is losing. Surrender is the worst thing that could happen, really, right? Because we think of it in terms of like warfare. But in, ancient culture and in mythology and all in kind of our collective knowing, there is always some part of the journey, right? That hero's or Shiro's journey that involves surrender, and there's loss, right? You lose who you were. So that's a death, and then there's a rebirth. And the medicine of, ayahuasca, just as an example, is very much a kind of death. And that's, we see that, like, the kinds of things that happen in the brain in a plant medicine ceremony is very similar to near-death experience. So near-death experience is like you've skipped your plant medicine journey. You just, like you can go straight to that. So, but I think surrender is it's a learned practice, and we can do it in a lot of ways in our life all the time. Like, as ridiculous as it may sound, so when Mercury is in retrograde, which, I know it sounds like, oh, we're going into woo, but these periods are really just, it's not like, oh, the planet is making something happen. It's just a reflection of energies that we're experiencing. And it's a language that describes those energies that, so we can time things and predict things and look at, like, okay, what kinds of challenges energetically and in our lives practically might come up during particular kinds of periods. And this is something that the ancients actually, it's a lexicon that was basically, I don't know if we want to say channeled, described, created by the ancients to navigate the unknown, right? Just like I Ching, just like tarot, just like numerology, all like Kabbalah, all these languages that were part of how, back in ancient times, a physician that didn't know astrology was especially, could not have been a good physician, right? So things have changed quite a bit, but we have a lot of languages that help us navigate the unknown and help us survive, those periods of surrender through this collective knowing. Mythology is many people believe, and I believe, that it is a collection of accumulated wisdom in the form of stories that are here to guide us and teach us so that we can prepare for those very moments. I don't think there's anything that can otherwise really make us not feel those things, because it's the whole purpose of the experience is to feel all those things and go through that process for one purpose.
Yeah, you're touching upon the hero on their journey, and this would be all of us, must touch all of those points. The highs, the lows, the all is lost, and that's part of the lessons of life, the growing in life. And we play these various roles: the artist, the shaman, the victim, and sometimes there are negative polarities. There's the hero, and the mother, the nurturer, the wise sage. We play these specific roles, it seems, because something is acting through us. It's not that we just, like, 100%. I feel like these archetypes that you're speaking about, we tap into them. There's something that, like, innately we seem to understand about nurturing from a very early age, or understand about the warrior, or understand about the martyr. And it is interesting that each of them, some of them we wear as like a badge of honor, and then some of them we wear like they shame us. But at the end of the day, if we've learned from them, it seems like that's where the value seems to come. I kind of found that, not to fly off into a tangent, but somebody on this other podcast was asking me about the fourth turning. And I was like, yeah, like I talked a little bit about these 80 to 90 year economic cycles. And then I said, just so you know, I've talked with a lot of people since then that don't like the model, or they say it's energy blind, or it's blind to this. And for me, I still gravitate towards one thing that book helped me do was just sense that there are cycles to what happens with collectives, not just individuals, but with collectives. And it caused me to feel that, we're in this crisis period, we're in this fourth turning period, if it's true, and that we're not just meandering into wherever, but that these things come and they go. And that must mean I have a place, I have some role to play here, that my voice isn't limp and inept and it's pointless. My voice can't be heard among the other 7.5 billion. It really caused me to step into, along with all the data that could be disproven, or I didn't even get into the noise. I took a look at the underlying pattern and structure and the archetype that it was showing me. And it allowed me to realize that, whoa, this is the hero's journey. And like, not only do I just naturally, by who I am, land in some of these categories, but I also get to choose. And then there's the unknown, and then I'm riding that wave of the unknown as well. So I really appreciate that you bring up astrology, because I noticed that the naysayers to astrology, while making some valid points, they isolate certain things, they attack those certain things, and then they make that seem like the whole of all astrology, when astrology's been around for how long? And it hasn't gone away for how long? And how many cultures use their own form of astrology? And by our mindset, we try to diminish it into a topic that we can explain away and assume that the entire topic fits into this little category that we can reduce away to say it's just superstition or it's just this. So that's a long way of saying I really appreciate you bringing the potentially woo topic of astrology in, because I feel like if we just dismiss these things outright because we don't have ways of wrapping language around them, we're missing out on the richness of the mystery of being able to say and claim, I don't know, I'm curious. I'm not just going to claim that I do know, so I'm not going to look at these topics. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to riff on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that mystery is very much a like the embracing of mystery and the embracing of that liminal and the kind of void before knowing, before doing and creating. Those are all really deeply connected to the sacred feminine, right? And those archetypes of the feminine, the masculine, which we all have within us and, are in the various ways. But so many of us have gotten, good feedback and have been valued for what we do that's related to masculine energies. Surrender is definitely also part of the divine feminine, that kind of receiving, the listening, the resting, all of those. And so I think that there's a recalibration that is coming into being. And I certainly think that a lot of these mystical arts, herbalism, midwifery, as well as things like, astrology and all of those other things, were all kind of wholesale pushed to the wayside at the same time as, right? So that was in the Age of Enlightenment and the European witch hunts. And then at the same time, we were, colonizing the New World. I say we, I mean, I personally was not, but like, this was happening in our world, and, and slavery, right? So all of these things, this attack on the indigenous cultures and And it was really a war in a certain way on the sacred feminine. I mean, many of those cultures, both in Africa and in, North and South America, were very focused on worshiping of the divine feminine, right? And so I think when we get into this idea of like science is all good and all this other stuff is woo-woo, et cetera, I think people don't realize that that's actually it's just a mirror of our totally imbalanced society and individual selves that we can only embrace and see value right now because this is how we've been conditioned in the masculine. And we can't see the value, and we feel even shame, I think, around the feminine within us. And even sort of the feminine that we call the feminine is sort of this weird, right? Like there's a lot of strangeness to the way we've labeled in our society feminine and masculine that are not really necessarily connected to those sacred archetypes. So I think it's time to start expanding the conversation. And I do think that as we embrace mystery, I don't think there's any accident that ayahuasca and psilocybin and these kind of plant medicines in general have been making such a comeback. And I say that because, I say it in quotes because obviously there's a real purpose behind it. And then there's the way we like to, sensationalize things and or venerate things and or ultimately commoditize, things that are actually very sacred. But I think that part of their bringing back their medicine at this time has to do with a balance that we need to find within ourselves of, the action and the, rest and receiving, the doing, talking, and the listening. I mean, sometimes like I just have to disappear from social media for periods of time because there's so much, everyone feels like they have to constantly be creating content. And it's like, nobody is like, where's the listening? Where's the receiving? Where's the, we're not rewarded for that. We're rewarded for just filling space with things. And so anyway, I think that this is part of a big shift that is going to be, it could be what helps us through this liminal time. I'm not into the idea of like, we're going to save the world, we're going to heal the world or whatever. I think, though, to your point of cycles that we do live, and I know we've talked about this before, that there are these cycles, and, ancient mystics really did not think, oh, we're getting better and better and better and evolving into a better and better thing. They were like, there are golden ages and there are dark ages, and there are golden ages and there are dark ages. And, it's really about how are we showing up, right? If there's a green screen behind us, everything going on is a green screen. Are we showing up well and in a way that we're proud of? And are we learning, and are we growing, and are we operating and comporting ourselves, in a good way? That's the real question.
One thing, you have a course coming up at the end of this month. I'm really curious to see what you're mentioning now, and like the nuanced wisdom that you're sharing. How and does that show up in your course material? I would love to know more about the course because, for me, I would love to learn more about the nuances that you're kind of bringing in. And, as you can see there, Dr. Oz, New York Times, the Huffington Post, the Chicago Tribune, CBS, NPR, it just goes on and on. There's a lot to mine in there. And I would love to know, like, what what is in your course and how do you display it in a way that's uniquely you?
Well, so for me, I think the main goal in anything I do is, to bring my lens and my perspective to whatever the topic is, and whatever the practice is, because I do think I have a unique perspective because I'm pretty immersed in science and medicine, from my training and from many years of practice. But I also am, very committed and in service to sacred and ceremony. And, for me, it's been a real embracing of my own indigenous lineage, which, my family is from the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, and there was a lot of, actually in my family, a lot of shame around that. Their Moroccan lineage, their, Berber lineage. And it's really, I mean, to this day, like I am the one person in a very, very big family who, talks about those things. And, I think having these sort of multi-layered and, multi-lensed perspectives are important for the people who want that, and so of course I do bring all of these perspectives into what I teach. It's why I do it. I'm never going to just create something to have it, like I didn't write a book just to have a book. Like there are better ways we can all use our time, right? So but the idea is that I, having studied plants for a long time, and not just, psychedelic plants, but all kinds of plants, that they're very powerful, and especially teacher plants or master plants. And that includes things like the coffee plant, right? And the cacao plant and the coca plant. Like when we're not in right relationship with the plants, then they will not be in right relationship with us. And we can see that from the opium poppy. We see that from the coca plant and even tobacco, right? We didn't come in a good way. We commoditize them, we abuse them, and they therefore have destroyed a lot of people. So I want to give people some guidance around, from my own experience and my own guidance that I've received, and what I've been taught, and the lineage that I've been initiated into, that I can give people some ways of being reciprocal with these medicines. Because if you're engaging with these plant medicines, you are entering into a reciprocal relationship. If you're not coming with your offering, then you're not fulfilling, right? It's like you're not fulfilling your part of the deal. And part of what that is just how are you integrating into your daily life, to how you're operating with other people and in the world, the things that are being shown to you in your journeys. A lot of people will keep going back for journeys and more and more and more journeys, but they're not necessarily, they're still doing like the same old crap. People say to me, well, if only we could get all the leaders of the world to just like be in an ayahuasca ceremony, then everything would be, it's like I hate to tell them that like a lot of billionaires are off doing that. A lot of them are off, they're doing mushroom journeys, they're doing ayahuasca, they're doing all the things. It doesn't make you automatically be in right relationship and be in service. That's our job. That's our, and if we're not going to come in the right way, then these plants can cause a lot of problems for us. I think we're in this right? Like I just read an article that was published by, I think like the Johns Hopkins team. What happens when the psychedelic bubble bursts? And it inevitably will, right? Like something's going to happen somewhere and it's going to create a whole thing. And there's going to be a reckoning. And, I don't know that we can avoid that because we get so excited by like fads, but I think we are in a place where, and some of us, maybe many of us, can learn to be in better relationship and reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, beautiful. I wanna know about your quantum ceremony in a bottle products. Just the fact that they are quantum products. I wanna better understand what that means and like what these products offer that most do not. And also like I love the fact that when we were talking off air, you were mentioning this is what makes it perfectly legal. Please let me know like what that is because this is definitely something my wife and I are going to be interested in.
So really, this was guided. I was guided towards this, and we have this idea that we can only receive medicine. I want to really expand the idea of what medicine is, first of all, in the mainstream. So, you're talking about the memes that I put up on Instagram sometimes, and like, that idea like laughter is medicine. I mean, now it's like a cliche, but right, like we need to engage with lots of different kinds of medicine. That's the first thing. So music and dance and art and nature and right, your relationship with your dog or cat or, whatever. All of these have medicine in them. Pain has medicine in it. And in this case, this idea that we have to ingest big amounts of something and have big experiences, that's the only way we can experience the medicine. I just found that to not be the case when people would approach me because they were interested in doing ceremony or interested in microdosing or interested in engaging with these medicines. I noticed that their lives already had started to change. Mm-hmm. And big things were happening before ever ingesting. And so what I realized very clearly is that, and I don't think this is a mystery to people who are very engaged with these medicines, for many of them at least, is you're in relationship with the spirit, the plant spirit. You're in relationship with the spirit of this medicine. It's not necessarily about ingesting big amounts and having big experiences in order to receive the medicine. And as sort of ecotourism has become, not surprisingly, more of a thing, people are concerned what's going to happen to San Pedro, what's going to happen to the ayahuasca vines, it's maybe less of an issue with certain kinds of mushrooms. But, a lot of these medicines are not meant to be consumed en masse. And now, of course, we have pharmaceutical companies trying to create, their designer products. Like you get the ayahuasca, but without the vomiting or without the psychedelic experience or, whatever it is. So, and I noticed too that when I would talk to people and they would tell me about their experiences in terms of integrating, if they had a ketamine experience or an MDMA experience, you would never hear them say in the same way, someone will say, ayahuasca told me XYZ, or the mushroom showed me this or that. No one ever says, at least in my experience, ketamine told me that, like it never, right? There's a very clear difference in those kinds of experiences. And I'm not knocking, ketamine or MDMA or what they can do or what they can offer. But simply that when we're engaging with the plants themselves or, these master plants, they're coming to us as teachers, and it's not just happening in physical reality. I think most people can accept that idea. So these drops are really made, they're made with the plants, in the presence of the plants. I grow, I have an ayahuasca vine and I have many, I think probably we have 60 San Pedro growing here. And they're not for ingesting. I also grow like toe, and I grow tobacco. I grow a lot of different plants that are just my part of my work, and my responsibility in my life is to tend these plants. And that's when I learn a lot of what I'm supposed to learn from them, is in tending them. And that's a whole kind of relationship. And so they want their medicine to be shared in a way that doesn't destroy them. And so the medicine is made in their presence with them, with medicine songs, with music of the plants, which there's even a device that you can transmit basically the frequencies that are emitted from the leaves of the plants, and it makes music. So we have that. We do it with, medicinal smokes and other things, and stones. And so there's a whole process in the making of these medicines. And it's done in very particular times of the year, of the month, when we make them, so that even the place where they are produced, I feel like I was, blessed by the angels that they really wanted this to happen, because they asked me, in the place that they're produced, they said, we will play medicine songs while we produce, your drops, and we will build an altar there. I sent them a picture and instructions and pieces, and they've created an altar. So, they're made in ceremony, and it's been really beautiful to see how potent their medicine is, because it is really about cultivating the intimacy that we can have with these medicines, and making ourselves available to receive what they have to offer. And also for people who do go to ceremony, do macrodosing or even microdosing, this is something that can help prepare you. It can help with the integration afterwards. There's a whole way that we want to understand, how do we bring the messages and the experiences that we have into our practical reality, right? It's sort of that, it's hard, right? Like, we have this sacred world we can be in, and then how do we bring that sacredness, that extraordinary experience, into ordinary reality? So that's part of what these drops.
You know what I like about that is I've been to your place. I've been in the presence of those plants, and in a way, I'm kind of quantum entangled with those plants, and therefore these drops that you're providing. So I feel honored in that way. I appreciate that. Yeah, this is beautiful, and I really appreciate the nuance that you bring to how medicine can be ingested, engaged with, not just ingested, and how often we feel like we need something to smack us over the head very violently in order for us to get the message, when in a way that's also asking, please, medicine, do most of the work, because I don't want to do much of it. I don't want to meet you halfway. And I just want the message to be super clear. I don't want to have to ask questions. I just want it to be very cut and dry. And I find that that's what I like about microdosing in many ways, is you can function, you can get on with your daily life. And in many ways, it's your daily life that you need to bring the medicine to, that you need to bring the grace to. So I really look forward to that. And that comes out when?
We're going to open for pre-sales at the end of this month. So they are ready. I mean, it's been a process to find all of the pieces and a place where they can be made that the people are interested in preserving the sacredness of the process, because I think you can do a lot of things, but then, once it leaves my hands, I wanted to, make sure that energy and that experience, was going to be continued. And so, I feel very lucky about that. And I think it's actually something that can really help us learn about relationship in general as well, so, these medicines have their own goals and their own messages that they want to transmit. And so we just get to be the vehicles and the transmitters, but it's all coming from the plants.
I love that. I guess my final question would be, kind of broader, which is, without there needing to be an ailment that we can wrap our minds around, how could the average person engage with bringing healing, not just to their family or the people that are around them, but to the earth? I know a lot of people right now, they're talking about the climate, whether they agree with the official narrative or not. That most people can agree that something's happening to the planet that we would like to believe we have some say in, or that we can do something about. And I'm curious, because you speak about healing and even transformational healing as if we're connected to this greater web, what is something the average person could do to just make a small step towards lending a hand towards the healing of what they perceive to be a sick, maybe even deranged, or in need of our engagement kind of scenario in the world? Something that, someone doesn't have to be sick in order to look for healing, but they want to offer it out to the world because they feel like they want to give. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that our greatest medicine usually comes from the thing that is the most uncomfortable or painful to us. I won't say that's across the board, but if you're not sure, right, of where to look, that's often a place to explore. And if we were any person, I don't know if this is a little too existential of an answer, but if any person, wants to offer their medicine to the world, I would say it starts with looking at the things that make them the most uncomfortable inside of themselves, and starting there, meaning we spend a lot of time running away from what makes us uncomfortable. I mean, and I include myself in that, right? Like I'm not, trying to make myself exceptional in this situation. I mean, we sit with our phones, we binge on Netflix, we, take all different kinds of substances. We sit and read about, the royal family and, et cetera, right? Where, what I'm thinking, the court case of like, who's like Johnny Depp. And, it's just these, and I'm not even, I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing, right? Because these are all diversions and distractions from kind of what's happening, and that what's happening is both pain and also joy, right? And when we're diverting our attention, we're missing out on engaging with both of those things. And both of those things have real medicine in them. So bringing things that are very joyful or diving into our own pain or suffering or anxiety or difficulty and kind of being with that a little bit and learning what it might have to tell us, inquiring, being curious with it. I think that's like a great beginning for finding what medicine the world needs. I don't think that like there's one thing, each, like, I don't think like if we all recycle, you know what I mean? Like that's going to solve the kinds of issues we're having. Right. But if we start to really look for our medicine and not let ourselves constantly get distracted from that process, I think that would be a good start. And like I said, I did start with pain and difficulty or anxiety or those things, but joy is part of that too, right? And we wouldn't even know what joy was if we didn't feel the opposite of that. So we need to engage with both of those things and do things that make us feel alive. I mean, that's, I think, like probably even my top recommendation is like, where do you feel that sense of excitement and yes and aliveness? Go do that. Do that as much as you can. Be playful in your life. Do things that like bring play and curiosity and experimentation into the picture. Any and all of these things. That's where you can lend your helping hand, and it's also helping yourself at the same time, which is a win-win.
I love that. And no, there is never too existential of an answer you could give on this program. I really appreciate that. And, I really also appreciate the way your mind and heart seem to work to formulate the answers to these, because they're not just thoughtful, but they really do, they bring up a balance that I find that many, as well as myself, can easily lose sight of. And the joy and the pain oftentimes will wallow in one or will just get lost in the other. And I only recently have been acknowledging that even in the best of times, like this too will pass. And what is the lesson? What can I learn from this? Rather than getting so lost in it and just have that unconscious expectation that it's going to last forever. This is how life should be, like at the top of this roller coaster. So I really appreciate that. And I want to make sure we give the audience a chance to find you, to connect with the course that you're coming out with, allow for our audience to know where they can go. We'll have it in the show notes below, but just remind people what they can engage with your material.
Yeah, just my website is a great way to find everything that I am offering, which is just drmaya.com, drmaya.com. And all my Terrain Institute programs are there, any products we have. And then I am usually very active on Instagram. I have small hiatus here and there. And I will be actually doing more on, believe it or not, TikTok, I guess.
You gotta.
Yeah. So don't go there yet because there's nothing right now. I think I have one video of my chickens. I keep chickens, so I think they're hilarious. But no, I will be offering, I think, some more material and content soon there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for giving your time. This was a really beautiful conversation. I'm really glad to continue this conversation that we've really had since I came and visited you. That would have been 2019.
Yeah. Feels like a whole lifetime ago.
Yeah, it was BC.
Yeah.
So thank you again so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please go into the show notes. Please check out Dr. Maya Shetreat's work. It's incredible. If you haven't read The Dirt Cure, it is timeless. So you should go get yourself a copy of it. There it is. And engage with all the beautiful work that's coming out. And please go on our Instagram and check out some of these really funny memes that she posts there, because for me, it's and yeah, there's more than just the funny memes, but there are some pretty funny ass things in there. So please engage with it as much as you can. And just remember that on this program, we do our best to bring people that are credible, credentialed, but also speak to a certain kind of nuance that we seem to find in short supply out there. And Dr. Shetreat definitely has that in spades. So I want to thank her. I want to thank all of you for coming back week after week. We do this every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You go onto the YouTube and you'll see our back catalog of all of our podcasts. And with that, I love you. Please engage with the solutions and that inner artist that you feel inside you. And I'll catch you all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.